Here we go. Section 6, down the rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen.
On June 29th, 2005, CCP announced a bevy of updates, most important among them being 2 new classes of ships. Dreadnoughts were a specialized class that wielded weaponry designed to attack the stations that had become vital for warfare. Controlling a station allowed the fighters of a defending or invading force to shelter in a safe hub from which they could launch their fleets, and dreadnoughts wielded the firepower to assault such bulky emplacements. Larger than battleships, formerly the largest class of ship in the game, dreadnoughts could enter siege mode, which would render them entirely immobile but grant a significant firepower increase. Constructing a dreadnought, however, was a massive undertaking, requiring new starbase modules called capital ship assembly arrays. Rather than assembling the dreadnought in full, there were multiple parts, each of which had to be fabricated separately and then combined to create the completed dreadnought. In order to move the massive amount of materials required for such a ship, the second class that they announced was the freighter. Significantly larger than their older counterparts, these freighters were capable of moving materials on an unprecedented scale. But while they were typically well armored,
you know, I didn't know that they put freighters and dreadnoughts into the game at the same time. When he explains it like that, though, that makes total sense. That the construction modules for capital ships are so large, they literally can't fit inside of T2 haulers. And you have to craft them individually. And then in their own special thing. This is one of the reasons I've said that capital ships become their own game. It is literally another game. Can you turn the sound up? Yeah, sure.
They would still be obvious targets for pirates and saboteurs. The implication was clear. In order to project power and protect what territory they had, alliances now were forced to turn inward and leverage their economies into production. But the dreadnoughts were eclipsed half a year later with the release of ships that would dwarf all others. On December 16, 2005, CCP released an expansion entitled Red Moon Rising. This time, 3 new ship classes were released. The first was the Carrier, a map.
That name pulls something out of the back of my brain when they introduced carriers.
Massive ship that relied on clouds of fighters to perform combat for it, intended as support for a fleet of smaller ships. On the release page, CCP explained that, quote, "The Carrier is an affordable capital ship, and most major corporations are expected to fund and deploy at least one for their engagements." End quote. The second was the Mothership, a larger variant of the more affordable carriers. But these 2 new ship classes were eclipsed almost entirely by the ship that would come to be synonymous with the game, the Titan. The sheer immensity of a Titan was difficult for players to conceptualize when it was announced. For the first 2 years of the game, the largest ships were the battleships, whose volumes hovered between 450 and 500,000 cubic meters. The largest Titan, in contrast, was an utterly massive 155 million meters cubed.
When I tell people about EVE Online, and they say, "What's the biggest ship in an EVE Online?" I say, "It's about the size of a moon." And they go, like a moon? I go, "Yeah." Yeah, it's like the size of a moon. They're like a whole moon? I go, "Yeah." Like, it's not as big as a planet, but it's as big as a moon. And that's no moon. And they're like, "Can I fly it?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you play for 5 years." They're like, "I don't want." I'm like, the Titan is a ship that is so massive, so unwieldy, that I don't think I'm ever going to fly one in a serious capacity. Now, who knows in 3 years when I'm still making EVE content, you know what I'm saying? Let's see it. But this is the Titan is such a different ship from a battleship. It's not a new game. It's a new game in a new, time zone with new expansions. How you play a Titan is so hilariously different from a battleship. It is one of the testaments to CCP's brain, to CCP Games' brain, that they absolutely were able to take something and just make it, it's not just bigger, it's a different thing entirely. Like, when I think about how Titans play, when I think about what I've seen used when I was in my first nullsec Corp back in the day, when someone dropped the Titan, this was like in Warhammer 40k, And the lore is, if you see one of the 40k troopers, that means you're on a front line place. That means you're in a place that, oh no, like, hey, they're here to save me, but oh no, it's the worst possible battlefield. Titans are like that in Eve. Where if you see one, goodness gracious. Right, Sanborn. Yeah. Can a Titan be like a POS? The short answer is no. But it does have a bunch of awesome buffs. You know, you can use the clone bay. It's kind of like if you look at the Rourke wall, they have similar stuff. So Titans have Doomsdays. Yes, exactly. Yes. Still remember that Valentine's Day with the Iteron and the Avatar promo? Whoa, Kaz, that's back in the day, bro. Crazy. Yes, that is the biggest one. Correct, Salties. Back then it was exciting, not anymore. Yeah, there it is. You know, so.
Well over 300 times as large.
It's still a little bit exciting. Just not as like, oh my god, you know.
The capabilities wielded by a Titan were commensurate with its size. The first key feature was the ability to open a jump bridge. While Titans were able to utilize the traditional Stargate network outside of HiSec, they also could be used to coordinate massive fleet movements. If another specialized ship could light a cynosural field, then the Titan could use it as a beacon and jump directly to its location, whether in the same system or not, bypassing the Stargate network entirely, as long as the stars were close enough. This meant that...
And I actually agree with Zaltis. Titans are used a lot. They're used a lot. It depends on the Corp. It depends on where you are. I think the changes to nullsec coming up are going to have a lot more use for these bigger ships. They're going to... The Cyno thing, again, is like another layer of New Eden that lets you move the way people don't expect. And it lets you play the game differently than other Corps, other players. And as of this recording, they're going to add new nullsec ore in the summer expansion of this year of 2024. So we're going to see how that changes everything. You know, so one drop from a Titan, 300 mil plus per Cyno and ISK. There it is. Yeah. That one phrase all FC screamed in comms, don't bump the Titan. Yeah. Yo, you did do a block? The Angel Titan is beautiful. Is it ore? They said resources. That's, you know, Kaz Medosa? That's a good point. I don't think I read ore. I think I read resources. You a smart cookie. That's interesting. For sure. Yeah. Not really. Titans were used a lot when they made them take gas. People stopped using them since it's too annoying to replace. It depends on what corp you're in. It depends on the kind of systems that those corps have. Because the bigger corps use Titans all the time. You see these big fights. I mean, all the time comparatively, right? So, Bill Martin, it's good to see you. Thank you. But they're not supposed to be used all the time, right? This is not an endgame ship. Titan is not an endgame ship. The Titan is another whole game. It's another entire way to play EVE Online. They're much more common now, for sure. This ship isn't a ship. It's like a mobile station in a lot of ways, and the utility you get out of it and the sheer DPS you get out of it is just so nuts that it just changes the game when they're dropped. So, you know what I'm saying? So, it's been weeks since the last Titan fight, yes, but there have been Titan fights, you know.
That, although the Titan was a ponderous ship, it could still rapidly relocate with proper coordination, sometimes directly into a fight, suddenly shifting the balance of power. What's more, other ships could join the Titan in this jump, meaning that it could be used to move an entire fleet at once between stars in great strides, without being forced into the natural choke points of the Stargate network. But the more tantalizing capability of the Titan was the Doomsday device.
Yeah.
While CCP was mum about the specific damage numbers, what was known was that a Doomsday device would inflict massive damage in a 500-kilometer radius, centered on a location of the Titan's choosing. What's more, the Titan would not even need to be present in the fight to launch the Doomsday. If another ship could light a cynosural field, then the Titan could fire its Doomsday through it, as long as it was still within the same star system. Many suspected that...
I did not know that. You can Doomsday through the Cyno? Like, if you're losing, you basically pick the FC.
Bro, we're losing.
What do you want me to do about it?
I don't know, Doomsday through the hole, I guess. Here's a Cyno.
That is wild. Ask that again in 2 minutes. They fixed this? Okay. You need a few hundred Titans to be a Titan fighter. There it is. No more. You can't do it anymore? We're going to see it later in this. I was going to say, I didn't know it. I didn't know that was a thing because it's been removed. There it is. That sounds abusable. Titan's not even there. still becomes this artillery mech, you know, sheesh. Nullsec wars became Titan Online years ago. I've been in so many wars, but I've never flown a cap in any, but I've seen hundreds of Titans fighting it out. That's a lot of people's experience, Alt. A lot of people's experience. I'm going to be getting into capitals this year. The goal is to get into capitals. I'm hoping by Q3 of this year. Capital, you know, going to be flying a carrier first. As he said, it's the affordable one, affordable 10 billion. You know, that's how it goes.
The first alliance to field a Titan would wield unprecedented power and become nigh unstoppable. Due to its area of effect, the power of a Doomsday scaled with the number of fighters on the battlefield, and over time, battles involving hundreds of players had become more and more common, further emphasizing the imminent importance and dominance of the Titan. Beyond these more immediately impressive features, the Titan also served as a mobile platform from which war could be prosecuted. Players who died could respawn inside of the Titan and take a new ship stored in.
That's a big one. It's the clone bay. A new ship stored. This is what I'm saying, is that Titans are like mobile stations. They're literally Death Stars. They're literally Death Stars. So, right. That was covered in Empires of Eve. You should read it. It's the reason I'm playing Eve. Right, chat. Can you link this to me? Is this a book? I would love. I need a new fantasy book. I just finished my Brandon Sanderson book. I was reading The Emperor's Soul. I just finished it, and now I have to go get another one. So let's totally do that. Yo, Nightshade, what's up? Coming in. Welcome in. It's good to see you.
In its hangar to join the fight once again, meaning that a player whose pod was destroyed would be able to rejoin combat immediately, as long as supplies were available. But before their incredible might could be wielded, one would have to be built. Much like the dreadnoughts before them, the different parts of the carrier, mothership, and Titan would need to be constructed separately in different capital shipyards, then brought together and assembled. No power based in Empire space would have the resources or capital required for such a massive undertaking, and even if one did, they would have war declared upon them immediately, and their capital shipyards would be divested from them. But even in nullsec, Andrew Groen notes that there were only 2 alliances who could feasibly produce.
I can't get over this UI. I can't get over it. First of all, look at the Fraps FPS. This is a Megathron, chat. We got what looks like ghoul newts and guns, probably, you know, whatever. Look at this, like 360p, incredible. I love Brandon Sandos. Sanborn, one of my favorite things. Yeah, for sure. I love Black Company. I've heard about it, Thomas. I haven't read it, but a lot of people are like, you got to read that, you know. So one day, this is. So, it's totally fine. Darius. There it is. We did him. The in-game browser and music player were interesting. I agree, Doublock. Yeah. We did, Nihilus. We really did. GG. Thank you, Derry. I appreciate it.
The first Titan, and they so happened to have laid claim to territory immediately next to one another. The warlike band of brothers, who had earlier crushed the alliances in the north, and the overwhelmingly massive Ascendant Frontier, consisting of former players from Earth and beyond. Of these two, Ascendant Frontier had the clear advantage. While skill and coordination could readily win a battle during this stage of the game, there was no way to outproduce a group with so many members. As Groen notes, quote, Ascendant Frontier was not focused on expansion or military endeavors as Band of Brothers was. Ascendant Frontier had come to own a huge swath of territory in the south, but its members' true passion was industry. Ascendant Frontier wanted to create a prosperous hub of trade and commerce in nullsec. It was working, too. It was pumping out space stations, outposts, and capital ships at a rate many times faster than the next closest industrial powers of the era. End quote. But to accomplish this feat...
Industry, ladies and gentlemen. How do you win a war? EVE Online shows you. How do you win a war? You don't win it by having the most soldiers. You don't win it by having the most territory. You win it by having the most disposable tanks. Daggum, look at those rocks, those giant potatoes. Look at this. You know, so they focused on industry and were able to pump out more capital ships, more stations, more battleships, right? More things than the enemy. So every time they lost something, they got 10 more. But if the enemy lost something, they only got 3 more. Now, all of a sudden, one of my favorite wars to wage in my Command and Conquer days was a war of attrition. I didn't take a resource hub. No. I just stopped you from taking it. I made sure that you bled yourself dry trying to take a thing. Sounds like that's what these guys are doing too. Well done. It does. It looks like styrofoam, you know what I'm saying?
They would have to overcome a new hurdle. Espionage. While often neglected in the first few years of
here we
EVE
go.
Online, its role in the operation of large alliances had increased, as had its notoriety after a particularly high-profile case. While most mercenary groups specialized in combat, another corporation, named the Guiding Hand Social Club, would instead perform contract work for clients looking to subvert their enemies. Sometime in late 2004 or early 2005, an anonymous client approached the Guiding Hand with a contract and a massive sum of ISK, hoping to buy their services to target ubiquitous.
What a great name for an espionage corporation, the Guiding Hand. That's something out of a book or a movie. That's awesome. That's sick. Salty's, good night. God freaking bless you, my friend. Well, thank you very much for being here and being awesome. Thank you, Salty's. Espionage. Is there another game like EVE Online? The answer is no. Is there another game that can do this? You have a whole corporation, right, devoted to James Bond stuff, 1/6. It doesn't happen. And maybe it happens, like a little bit, excuse me. But not to this, not a corporation whose entire operations are for espionage. Wow. Wow. It's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And that's a problem, Shadar, for sure. But they'll keep on improving stuff. Sheesh, you know what I'm saying? There it is. Yeah. Right. There it is, Jado. Yeah.
Seraph, a large corporation of the time. They asked that Ubiqua Seraph's coffers be ransacked and their communal hangars emptied of ships, but the contractors would be allowed to keep all of what they pillaged. The only object that the client wanted was the corpse of the CEO, Mural, the leader of the...
Damn. Oh my God.
Listen, I'm gonna pay you a lot of ISK. To take their stuff. Also, this pause screen is horrifying. You're gonna take all their stuff. And when you take all their stuff, you can keep everything. I want the corpse of the CEO. That's it.
That might be the most EVE Online thing I've ever heard. Wow.
Guiding Hand, Istvan Shogatsu, was similarly disinterested in the spoils, though he accepted these terms all the same. The Guiding Hand spent months infiltrating, earning positions of
See you soon, unknowing. Thank you very much.
trust and authority. They were more successful than their client could have dreamed. Multiple members found themselves entrusted with much of the corporation's assets, and one agent, named Zemdal, found themselves as one of Mural's lieutenants. Istvan explained, quote, Arenis Zemdal is what we call a Valentine operative. Essentially, his job is to seduce and entice an objective into a state of trust and confidence. As such, we'd call Mural's relationship to him moments before the strike endeared. End quote. On April 8th...
If you wonder why corporations that are big null blocks require in-game mail to be revealed, this kind of stuff is why. Are you telling me EVE Online, ladies and gentlemen, espionage, you can't trust anybody? It kind of sucks. It's one of the reasons why when I join the corp that I'm going to pick, I'm going to do my best to give y'all value regardless of the corp, you know? Because my goal playing this game is to provide value to those around me, not to undermine those around me. I think it's interesting a video game lets you do this, and very scary. Incredible. So
2005, the code word was sent to every agent. Nicole. Immediately, the corporation was drained of all of its liquid assets and much of its stores of supplies, and Zemdal collected the CEO's corpse along with a squad of Guiding Hand members who had rendezvoused to help deliver the killing blow. Istvan made a public announcement shortly after, with characteristic flair.
It has been some time since I last stood behind a podium and made a public announcement, so you have to forgive me if I'm somewhat out of form. The reason I stand here before you is to announce that my mercenary outfit, the Guiding Hand Social Club, has completed its most ambitious contract to date. Our target was assigned to us many months ago. It took months, chat. Oh my God. Muriel of something. Our task was to carry out that which the GHSC has now become known for to the Guiding Hand Social Club, to utterly demolish Muriel and bring all who followed her to their knees in one fell swoop. For those many months, we toiled, secreting our operatives among her ranks, steering her organization through a number of insidiously engineered events meant to engender trust and divert their attention from where it should be. This is some maniacal stuff. And as much as I respect it, I hate it. I get it. I get it, champ. I know it's kind of cool that they were able to subvert stuff. I get it. You're never going to see me do this kind of thing. And no, I'm not saying that as some reverse psychology crap. You know, but this, wow. Wow, you're right about that, Jado. You're right about that. I tried over a dozen MMOs in 2004 before finding Eve. I was a Guild Wars 1 and World of Warcraft veteran. I like Eve.
Quote, "Greetings, everyone. It has been some time since I last stood
We're gonna
behind
fast
the
forward.
podium in the circle of simultaneous Corp hangar heists, attacks in open space, and facility invasions. The Ubiquitous Seraph came to know the wrath of the Guiding Hand Social Club firsthand.
Wow.
The result shatters any previous records for sheer scale of such an endeavor. Our net gain from this massive heist is roughly estimated at over 20 billion ISK. Total damages inflicted are estimated at close to 30 billion ISK. Thank you all for your time." End quote. This would be far from the final major act of the Guiding Hand Social Club, though they would be more covert from this point forward. This level of metagaming, however, wasn't shared by all people. Most roleplayers, for example, would attempt to play the game as a character within the game world, but those who didn't roleplay often regarded them with derision and saw them as potential targets, either for ridicule or aggressive action. While discussing Eve online for her podcast This Game Changed My Life, Eva Wilson posits that, quote, "The people you're talking to don't know that the talking part is a game too. You're going in, you're making friends, you're gaining their trust, you're spending a lot of time with them. They're being nice or whatever, and you know you're lying to them to the point of screwing them over." To which her co-host, Julia Hardy, replies, quote, "When you play a game, you are aware of what the structure and the rules of the game are because everyone's playing by the same rules. That's how you know it's a game. But then if someone comes in and completely changes all the rules but no one else is aware of the new rules, then it just doesn't seem like a fair game." End quote. These early years
That's something to think about. You know, that's exactly how I feel about stream sniping. Ladies and gentlemen. That is how I feel about stream sniping. That the snipers are playing by a different set of rules than other people. They're gaining information over content creators, and we beat the stream snipers today. But we're not always going to beat them. Sometimes it's going to be, you know, we're going to die, you know? So, yeah, and Shadinar, you're right, 30 billion is nothing. But back then, that was a whole corp. 30 billion? They got 50 billion, right? Because it was 20 in gains and 30 billion in losses, I think. That was the whole corp. Right? And the gankers in high sec. Well, the gankers in high sec, they're playing the same game as the miners. The miners just want, I don't think that applies there, because the miners in high sec, they need to understand that the gankers in high sec they're always going to be hunted. You know.
You are never safe in Eve. Thank you very much.
Like, the gankers in high sec are playing the same game the miners in high sec are, even if the miners in high sec don't realize it. You know, when you get ganked for the first time when you're in high sec and you lose your big ship and you're like, oh my god, what am I going to do? Now, every time you go out, you're playing the same game as the gankers. You just gotta not die. That's the thing, chat. Just don't die, you know? So, sheesh. So, 30 billion was a lot. Exactly, Cass. Yeah, right. You know, so, it's interesting because when you're talking about Eve, you're talking about a game that is, you hear about politics in other MMOs, but Eve, like everything else in game, takes politics, just like mining or combat or all this stuff, and it compounds it to like the nth degree. You're never going to hear about a 6 month, whatever the heck long espionage ring orchestrated by mercenary spy corporations infiltrating a big corp, killing the CEO, taking his corpse. We know what that takes. We know what that takes. Like, they had to get him trusting them enough that he was like, sure, I'll go grind some level 5s with you or whatever, you know? And then they took him out. And then as they were taking him out, they also were emptying the storehouses. This had to be like an of-the-hour thing. They had to be doing it right then. Because you know the moment that they took him out, he's going to send texts, voice comms out to everybody else that he knows. And they're going to log into their stations and find them either gone or empty or both. It's wild. Just don't be stupid. But what is stupid depends on how much you've experienced in Eve. That's one of the reasons that we make the videos that we do. I agree. I agree, DMI. I totally agree.
began to establish the rules by which people would play EVE Online. Where other games of its ilk were played mostly within the game world, and this was generally respected by the
story we just heard brought JA moniker to EVE Online. I hear you. You're going to hear this a lot, actually. And that's great, JA. It's good to see you. Where the things that brought people to EVE are the stories. What do you think I'm going to make in 2024, y'all? Let me cook.
other players, real-world duplicity was gradually becoming a normal and expected part of New Eden, whether the existing players wanted it or not. Many of the first capital ships were destroyed before even being completed, thanks to the spy networks and scouting work from rival corporations. But finally, on September 25th, 2006, 9 months after Titans were first introduced into the game, the refugee players from Earth and Beyond and Ascendant Frontier completed the first Titan. Triumphantly, their leader, Sivok, flew it into the capital system of the Alliance, allowing everyone to marvel at the finished Avatar-class Titan, which he named Steve. The origin of this name is
Come on, dude. 9 months after they announced the game, after grinding defense. First of all, the first one being an Avatar makes total sense. It is, my opinion, the best looking Titan. What do you name the first Titan?
How about we name it Steve?
Literally kill me.
in contention. Most sources believe that it was named after the late Steve Irwin, who had died earlier that month, but Andrew Groen recalls that Sivok attributed the name to a scene from the animated film Over the Hedge, released 4 months prior, in which the squirrel character Hammy comedically proposes naming the massive, newly erected hedges Steve. Whatever the origin of the name,
Chat, we're not naming our first Titan Steve. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. NQ, thanks for the follow on Twitch. God bless you.
the completion of Steve heralded war. Immediately, their enemies and band of brothers invaded, but the power of Steve the Titan blunted their advance simply with the threat of its presence until December 11th, 2006. During a large-scale battle, Sivok unleashed his doomsday safely through a cynossural field, then jumped to a safe point 20 systems away. But what happened next would change the paradigm of players for years to come and would pit Band of Brothers against the rest of New Eden. More importantly, though, it would all.
Did you see the ships evaporate? Truly a doomsday weapon. Did you see the blips? It went brrr, the lights getting snuffed out like they were candles. Wow.
Also begin a process that would sour the relationship between the developers of EVE Online and its players.